Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining us now is Lanny Ebenstein. He is the editor of the indispensable Milton Friedman, essays on politics and economics. It's great to talk with you today.
John, it's great to be here and to be talking with you about Milton Friedman also.
Well, he, of course, was an economic advisor to President Reagan and perhaps the most influential economist of the 20th century. He's a hero to a lot of conservatives, but also a lot of conservatives seem to be very critical right now of Fed Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke. But you say Friedman would likely support Bernanke's activism in the arena of monetary policy, including quantitative easing. Why is that?
I think that Friedman thought in exceptional circumstances, exceptional action is called for, and he certainly would not favor quantitative easing under normal circumstances. But Friedman, as Bernanke is, was a great student of the Great Depression, and one of the real mistakes that was made at that time was that as monetary velocity was declining, the money supply was not increased. We have that same situation occurring today, which is to say money isn't changing hands as quickly as it previously did, and therefore you have to have more money in circulation in order to be able to compensate for that decline in the rate at which money changes hands. So in order to retain stable prices, you actually have to have something like quantitative easing in extraordinary circumstances. So Bernanke was a great admirer of Milton Friedman. He spoke at Milton Friedman's 90th birthday party and a birthday celebration. So others could differ, but I think that Friedman would not necessarily be opposed to what the Fed has been pursuing.
And of course, we've just seen QE3 of the Fed's third round of quantitative easing now underway. How effective do you think it will be, and what are the inflationary pressures that will be brought on by this new round of quantitative easing? And also, one more question in terms of this: do you think this will bring those high unemployment rates down?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually modestly optimistic right now, and obviously, who wins the presidency is going to have a huge impact on the economy. If Israel attacks Iran, that would have a huge impact on the economy for years. So there are facts that we're not yet certain of that could change everything. But if we're going to presume that Israel that there won't be some major event in the Middle East, and that irrespective of whether Romney or Obama is elected, that some progress will be made toward reducing the federal budget deficit, and that's an open question. I think that QE3 is probably necessary at this point in time because the pace of economic activity remains so slow. I think that in terms of the inflationary pressures, typically quantitative easing would result in inflation. However, at this point in time, that hasn't happened with QE1 or QE2. So whether it happens whether the third time is the charm, as it were, is a different question. But I don't think that it's necessarily the case that QE3 will be accompanied by a return of inflation. And I don't see inflation as the major problem in the American economy right now. It's lack of growth. It's extremely anemic growth after a very severe recession, the most severe recession since the Great Depression. To have this slower recovery with a stimulative monetary and fiscal policies as we've had indicates there's really deeper issues in the American economy, and I think that within that situation that quantitative easing makes sense, at least for the time being. If it looks like inflation is returning, then it'll be a time to try to reduce the amount of money supply.
Well, let's focus back on Friedman in this comparison of the presidential candidates right now. What do you think he would have said about President Obama's stimulus, which has yet to yield the results the president promised?
Yeah, I think that Friedman would have been completely opposed to the stimulus package. He would have seen it as just pork support for public employee unions at the state levels, and very unlikely to have resulted in any significant stimulus at all. Friedman would have said if you want to try to stimulate the economy via the fiscal approach, it would be better to give tax cuts rather than to have government spending. But
Yeah, we're hearing a lot from Democrats and Republicans now in this debate about our tax system. Of course, we hear from the Obama administration. They want to raise taxes, especially on the wealthy. Governor Romney says he wants to cut taxes for everyone. Romney says he would pay for these tax cuts by eliminating loopholes. What would Friedman say about Romney's tax plan?
Well, I think that Friedman would not necessarily have supported the effort to keep as low taxes on the wealthy as Romney has proposed. At the top levels of taxation, there's actually relatively low taxation in the United States. The top 400 taxpayers only have a combined tax rate of less than 15%, which is less than self-employed people pay in Social Security tax. So I'm not necessarily of the view that Friedman would be supportive of the exact across-the-board type tax cuts that Governor Romney suggested originally. Now, Governor Romney appears to have backed away from that proposal because at a time, one thing Friedman was very concerned about was the increasing inequality in American society, and he thought that it was very dangerous for a society to have the extremes of wealth and poverty that now exist in American society. He thought that even 10 years before he passed away. So it's something that where Friedman probably would have most favored tax cuts would have been on Social Security in terms of, I think that if there are going to be tax cuts that are going to try to stimulate the economy, that's where it would make sense, would be to try to cut taxes on working Americans. And, those are the Americans who are going to spend those tax funds, and to the extent that gets the economy moving, that's the way to do it. So
you also recently wrote that Friedman would have considered Obamacare to be a disaster. Which part of the law do you think he would find most appalling?
Well, I think that the nationalization of health insurance and health care in the United States is what Friedman primarily would have been opposed to. He thought, his view was that there should be health savings accounts, and if there was to be insurance, it should be catastrophic insurance, because the problem we have in America is that we spend far more on health care as a percentage of gross domestic product than other countries. And that's really meaning those resources aren't available for other uses in the economy. And there's a great deal of waste, duplication, bureaucratization, and unnecessary expense in the healthcare field. And if healthcare is nationalized, that will probably make these problems worse. It won't make them better. So Friedman would have opposed just about every aspect of Obamacare, from its nationalization to its coverage of all aspects of medical costs.
Well, we certainly did learn a lot from Milton Friedman. His writings are like a good record, that they may be have a little dust on them, but they're always good and applicable to today. Lenny Ebenstein, thanks so much for being with us today. It was great talking with you.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. And the book, once again, is The Indispensable Milton Friedman. So he really is someone who remains indispensable.
Great talking with you.